and I'm very eager to hear what Wayne and Sarah have to say because I haven't caught up with them for about a year now. So I'm going to report on a very recent study that we have done with this mysterious title, What a Difference a Crisis Makes, Go Big or Hunker Down, That's to keep you on the edge of your seats until the last 2 points. So if we go to the next slide, Abby, just a quick overview. I'm not sure whether the whole slides are showing, but if they are, then good. But obviously, we go back quite a long way. As I said earlier, we started researching this in about 2015, and we've written up our research in 4 books, with another one coming in 2021. And I want to report really on the research most recently done to find out how people have been dealing with COVID and how they're coming out the other end, with a particular focus on the front runners there. So our most recent study, which has been supported by both Blue Prism and London School of Economics, I did with Knowledge Capital Partners, and it was a 5-sector study across 5 major sectors to discover how this was managed, backed up by a survey. So if we move to the next slide, I've got 10 points that I'd really like to make that distills out of that report, which is running from, we're still progressing that, it's running till May, the end of May. And there are a bunch of papers coming out of that. I'll give you where you can get them from at the end. So the first point, despite all the rhetoric about acceleration, when we just look at RPA, let alone cognitive automation, it's been largely unexploited. It's staggering, really, that it is unexploited, because, as Wayne and Sarah will tell you, there are real benefits from applying this kind of dull, boring, but very effective technology. And of course, cognitive automation, the bunch of tools that are now being connected with RPA, adoption is even further behind. But we were finding, even in 2016, that the 4 front runners were getting 30 to 200% return on investment in the first 18 months. So at some stage, we are mystified as to why it's the vast opportunity is so unexploited. When you look at the next point, most clients have between 1 and 50 robots. Few, 13%, have scaled to up to 100, let alone a higher number. And really, they're running into a number of problems, which have been quite well detailed by a number of reports. But we're finding it's about challenges in scaling. It's about challenges in not seeing this as a strategic investment. And it's about having low aspirations on the benefits you can actually achieve. Now, we know that that's been shifting into 2021. We know that there has been some acceleration, quite rightly, in my view, knowing what these technologies can do. And so, just to give you a central play piece, a model really of where we think we are, if we look at the next slide, what I've tried to map on the next slide is really on the horizontal axis, the way in which people have proceeded into automation and what cognitive automation and what's eventually going to be called digital business. Over time, in practice, we've seen organizations go through these various phases, from quite a primitive phase of let's get the ROI from this technology, into essentially efficiency and cost savings agendas, into what we call the triple win agenda, which we found quite early in more mature users in 2016, 17, where they're going for employee benefits, shareholder benefits, and customer benefits. So not lacking aspiration there. And to where very few people are, into phase 4, integrating your efforts with automation, RPA, cognitive automation, into other emerging digital technologies, so you end up as a digital business, which is another study that we're doing. But I just want to make one point here, which is what is interesting is that if you have a bottom-up approach to automation, you will probably start with a very big emphasis on efficiency, getting efficiency savings, efficiency benefits. At some stage in phase 2 and phase 3, people start realizing that actually this automation can give you effectiveness. It can get you to do the right things enabled by these technologies. And that's an exponentially different game to be in terms of value. And then there's an even bigger jump between effectiveness and enablement, where you establish some sort of digital options platform in which you discover that the benefits you get are exponential. Now, just very quickly, if you start from the bottom up, you tend to be hunkering down in our view. If you start from the top, if you see strategically that you want to be in phase 4 and you orientate everything you do about automation to get there, then that's really going big, as we call it. It's a big bets approach to automation. You view it strategically, but you might actually build consistently towards the phase 4 endpoint. So if we look at the next diagram, next slide, what we're finding is that a whole load of organizations are getting caught in phase 2. They are milking the cost efficiency phase, and they're looking forward at possibly phase 3, and they're saying, these costs, this is difficult. These costs additionally to get to phase 3 look very prohibitive, and the benefits, we're not seeing the benefits that people like Leslie Wilcox said that there would be, or Sarah Burnett or Wayne Butterfield. And so we're not really progressing the agenda beyond the efficiency phase. So there's that big barrier, which explains the results that we were getting. Phase 5, point 5 is about phase 3. If you get to phase 3, and we've seen many organizations in phase 3, we're still finding that it divides out. Organizations' performances at that point are quite variable. Only about 15 to 20% of organizations are doing very well with behaving strategically and linking their automation with digital transformation. Sometimes we're finding that automation and digital transformation are driven out of different camps within the same organization, and they never quite meet, and they're funded differently, so you don't get the level of integration you would expect. A rather daunting figure to dissuade you from doing digital transformation, although in my view it's a necessity now, comes from McKinsey and Gene Ross at MIT and people there, that 75 to 85% of digital transformation projects actually are failing, depending upon sector and depending upon circumstances. That's not very encouraging, but it does mean that potentially 25% are not failing. And really, I think those people, certainly at MIT, and we're discovering that there are big management issues around digital transformation. A lot of people don't apply effective management, which makes the next point very important, which is across all our studies, we're finding that actually 25% of the problems are technological and about 75% are organizational and managerial. And I like to point to what I call the 8 siloed organization. What's getting in the way are sort of silos that block the end-to-end usage of these technologies. Managerial mindsets is one of them, but there's also skill set, structure, culture, processes. The technology itself might be siloed, as is data. So you're getting big problems there. And if you haven't got the right governance capabilities in place and capabilities in place to deliver, you run into real problems. So my conclusion with John Hindle, my co-researcher, is that there's a massive value being left on the table. McKinsey's reckoned that there's about $1 trillion being left on the table in the banking sector alone globally. And what we're finding is that there is this exponential multiplier. If you focus on efficiency, you can get up to 200% more value than you had before. If you focus on effectiveness, you can get up to 500% more value. And enablement, not just us, we're finding that some very rare organizations are getting some 10 times more value than they getting without the automation and that approach. So last slide. Last slide is point 8. Where are we with COVID-19? Well, it's not all accelerating into the mists of nirvana and success. I think we found our last study, 65% of organizations in COVID-19 understandably focused on short-term immediate use. They use more technology, they use more automation technology, but it is essentially very short-term call centers, remote working, that sort of things being supported. 20% had strategies, but they delayed them. And only 15% were really being very proactive on pushing forward a digital platform for resilience, adaptiveness, and creating much more business options. So we think we've reached a decision point. You know, the organizations have to really decide now: are we going to go big, or are we going to hunker down? By going big, I mean that they are going to build some sort of digital options platform, which is going to give them resilience, adaptiveness, create much more strategic options, many more opportunities at relatively low costs. And they're going to do that by having what we call big bets thinking very big about what they really want to do to get to phase 4. This is going to be taking full advantage of what the technologies can actually do, especially in combination. And a lot of people don't really see yet how the combinatorial innovation of using these technologies together can create exponentially much more value. The alternative is to hunker down, which looks a safer route, but might end up in a loss of competitiveness in the end in that particular sector. So focusing on efficiency, today's competitiveness, internal problems, taking a bottom-up approach, and having linear thinking really on the value that you can get from these technologies. So that concludes my set of points. Hopefully it sets the frame for the discussion. If you want to pick up on the papers and books that we're doing, I've got a reference there at the back of the slides. I'm sure you can download the slides at some point. And they're all free, not the books, but the papers are. And they're coming out every month from now till July, I think. So that's my piece, Kerry.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Leslie. We are going to ask for questions, so please do put questions in the chat panel, and we will be moving this on to a discussion afterwards. But I wanted to get the views of the other two speakers first before we go into discussion. So Sarah Burnett, partner at Emergence Partners. Lovely to have you with us. I'd now like to pass over to you to get your perspective on all of this, Sarah.
Thank you, Kerry. I'm just going to share my slides with you. Here we are. Hopefully you can see them now, the presentation mode rather than my speaker
Perfect.
mode.
Yeah, it's lovely, thanks.
Good. Okay. So good morning, everyone. I'm going to share with you the Emergence Tech Plus stack, which is designed to help organizations visualize the capabilities that they need for profound transformation. And that is transformation that is long-lasting, creates impact, and is collaborative as well. Intelligent automation is a major part of this, and I'll be referring to that frequently during my talk. Before I do that, though, I would like to share with you the results of a survey that we have done at Emergence Partners. And this is Technology Impact Pulse Survey. So this is about our organizations achieving impact with technology. It's very new. We've got a lot of data we're still analyzing, but I just wanted to share the early findings from that research. And here it is, just to set the scene. We asked 177 large enterprises in the US and Europe about their top 3 technology investment priorities in the past 12 months. It was largely focused on US and UK, but we did have a lot of participants in Germany, France, and other European countries as well. And as you can see from the slide, fairly evenly distributed across industries. And we asked them, what were the top 3 priorities for you? And this is the result of the answers to that question. You'll see that process automation has come top. And this is in the number of times that it was listed as the top 3 priority. And this is, I guess, not surprising given we are where we are in the pandemic, that organizations are suffering from staff absences because of the pandemic. There's a lot of demand in some industries, for example, as people try and sort out their finances, impacted by the problems of lockdown, for example, loan repayments, wanting to delay mortgage repayments, those kinds of things, as well as a lot of people who've lost jobs and they want to tap into their pensions and savings. So there's a huge demand, for example, in the financial industry anyway, but others are also impacted, insurance companies and drug manufacturing companies and so on. Cloud was the next priority, as you can see, the most mentioned. And again, that's in keeping with what's going on in the industry, in the world, really, given that, you know, we are in that kind of state of some recession in some parts and huge growth in other parts. If we break down what the automation was about, these are the kind of processes that they're hoping to automate. So I've split that between IT processes and business processes. You see that using intelligent solutions for automating IT processes is very much the top priority. And again, that isn't surprising given that we have a lot of home working now, and IT departments have had to deal with edge security. They've had to deal with people working outside their firewalls, all kinds of challenges that has presented. There are huge backlogs of things to sort out in IT. For business processes, RPA is the top pick. That's what they want to use to automate it, followed by intelligent solutions, and IT process automation has come last. So what are the drivers for investing in technology? And you'll see that improving business processes here is the most important, rated above 4 out of 5. Cutting costs, the forever presence driver for efficiency, and increasing capacity, staff productivity, and so on. There are other interesting drivers as well. For example, making up for a shortage of skills, improving customer experience has sort of dropped down a bit in terms of priority. What this tells me is that companies are focusing on core capabilities, being able to survive and thrive in this kind of strange climate that we are in. But these aren't exclusive of each other. The important thing is that with what we call profound transformation, with collaborative, inclusive, joined up type of effort, you can achieve many of these all in one go, really. You don't have to aim for one or the other. It's about a collective set of benefits that you can realize. And this is where we are hoping we can help with the Tech Plus stack. It is a Tech Plus because it's at the heart of it, it's focused on the outcomes, and at the top of it, it's about people, the culture, the mindset of the organization, which is so often included in transformation projects, but perhaps not to a large enough extent. and there can be some disastrous results as because of that. There was one example that I remember, a large insurance company that had started to automate processes, but without getting the stakeholders, the people who were going to be affected, on board. And this led to huge problems. It was almost like open warfare between the IT department that was driving the change and the business departments that didn't want it, to the extent that they were refusing to provide information about their processes. And this led the IT department having to deploy other technology to capture information about processes from the desktops, which is an absolutely dire situation. This is an extreme case, but basically such a situation would take years to actually overcome, almost requiring a complete change of personnel if you're ever to overcome it. And the outcomes often are really not focused on very much. There's that sort of tactical approach, which is I need that technology for one particular requirement, but not that kind of joined up outcome. And this often leads to problems as well. So this stack is about bringing all the important aspects of transformation to the fore. So we have here the classic business systems and the data integration and system integration aspects. We have the infrastructure included here, security, of course, ever present. And we're seeing a lot of insights, use of analytics for decision making. Design thinking is becoming very important in more and more organizations. And of course, the newer technologies, artificial intelligence, which is now to a large degree, appearing more and more, I should say, in different systems and being embedded in different systems. We're seeing it, for example, in office products where there are capabilities that prompt you for doing the right thing, for a kind of virtual assistant being built by Microsoft, for example, in the shape of Cortana, and the intelligence that it now delivers on your daily routine. A lot of focus on interaction channels, but maybe not so much focus on these other areas: process optimization and automation, software and app development. So the point of this is that you can drill into each area and add the technologies that you have and identify the gaps and then work towards those gaps. And the point is that you can actually plan long-term objectives and then set out the shorter term steps that would take you towards those objectives. This concept of zoom out, zoom in, which I really like, which is you zoom out several years and think what kind of organization you want to be, what kind of capabilities do you need in order to become that organization, and then step by step in the short term, not only achieve the immediate needs of the organization, but also build the capabilities towards that bigger objective. And you can visualize this. What happens typically is that organizations are just focused on the business systems that they already have, the interaction channels, the security, but increasingly using analytics. And what we're seeing now is actually embedded capabilities. So what is it that your existing system can provide you? Maybe we can actually redefine intelligent automation. Maybe it's not all about buying new technology, but what is it that you can do within your existing systems? Are you using those to the maximum capability that they offer? And then we move on to these areas, and if we zoom in onto those, process mining is something that is coming to the fore, and interestingly in the priorities list it's not so high in our survey. It wasn't rated so highly as a priority, but what I'm seeing is absolutely phenomenal results being achieved by companies that have already automated processes and need to identify the next things and achieve that scale that is still lacking. I thought Leslie's slide about only a very small number of companies having more than 50 robots, I think, tells a very good story. And you need to scale. And process mining and desktop mining tools. You know, I was working with a company recently that is reporting 30% efficiency benefits through the kind of opportunities that process mining identified and allowed them to then address either process issues, bottlenecks, or enable their staff to work better. So I think that will be the next big wave that we'll see. That will be the buzzword in the coming years. And the other area is low code and no code. Excuse me. What we see is that is also not a high priority. But, you know, with the concept of citizen developer and more business people getting the taste for robotic process automation and being able to codify their processes, I think that's something that will also come to the fore. Just to wrap up my section then, basically the Pulse survey shows demand for intelligent automation is high, and that is driven by the need to improve processes, cut costs and create capacity. All of these can be achieved through a holistic approach to adoption of tech, which is also collaborative and inclusive, not forgetting the human factor. Make the most of the built-in or easy to add on capabilities in your existing systems. We see that in, for example, supply chain solutions that now have intelligent capabilities that tell you, you know, what kind of discount opportunities you might have. These are just very simple, very sort of immediate and available examples of embedded AI. Picture your Tech Plus stack. Where are the gaps? What do you need to do in order to fill those gaps? You can systematically go through those areas and drill into the capabilities and create a visual representation that would hopefully then help the sponsors give you some money and some funding to fill those gaps. And that brings me to the end of my talk.
Okay, that's excellent. Thank you very much, Sarah. So, I can see your question, Simon. We will be coming on to that, but I do want to give the floor to Wayne first of all, so we can hear from all three speakers and then have the conversation. So, Wayne Butterfield, obviously first met you many moons ago, probably 8 years ago when you were at Telefonica O2, just beginning on this automation journey. Obviously you're now at ISG. I'm sure you've seen, you know, all sides of automation implementations from both the customer and the service provider perspective. So we'd love to get your view. So over to you, Wayne.
Excellent. Thank you, Kerry. Hi, everybody. I am going to be slightly different to the guys. I am going to show one slide. But again, to Kerry's point, I have obviously been part of industry. You know, I worked for Telefonica in the UK and also British Telecom. My background is actually operations, so running operations, both onshore, offshore, and so my kind of experience has really been in or from an operational perspective rather than a technology perspective. And having now done this, I hate to say it, but the wrinkles do prove this, a decade or over a decade actually since I first bought or purchased a Blue Prism license in late 2010. I feel like I've got a lot of war wounds, and not only can I say that you know, I've been there kind of in the trenches, but I would say that I actually started my journey being incredibly tactical versus strategic, and so I'm still kind of on the fence on whether being strategic, certainly with things like RPA, is actually the right thing to do. So I wear many hats in this, and I flip from kind of viewpoint to viewpoint on a regular basis. And also, you know, when I catch up with Sarah and Leslie and hear, you know, where the market's going, hear the latest trends, it always does kind of move my thinking from one place to another. But I've got 7 steps, I think, today, 7 kind of trends, topics that I'll run through very quickly, because I am conscious of time and I know that there are questions already. But my kind of two pence on, what does it take? Where have I seen automation become strategic, and what are the trends that I've seen in when that happens and when it doesn't? We do at ISG have our own proprietary research. Again, it's called the Bot 3.0 study, which we use. And so some of these trends are from that, and some of these are from my own experience. So the first one, and Leslie mentioned this, it's not really a strategy if it's pushed from the bottom up. It's not to say that you can't make progress. And for anyone who's read Leslie's first book and the specific story in there around Telefonica, this was very much bottom up, or at least middle up. I was not overly senior in that organization, yet was able to make change. I was able to implement this technology. Nearly got me fired a couple of times, but I was able to implement it. And we got some fantastic results. But it didn't profoundly change the organization. It didn't change our EBITDA. It didn't get the attention of the senior leadership within the organization until I caused a massive catastrophe. But outside of that, it really struggled to gain the attention that it needed to, or should have done. And so it never really became strategic. It was always a tactical option, at least to start with. So thinking about this, really the strategy needs to be from top down to rather than bottom up. Secondly, I think you really, and this goes back to I think what Sarah was kind of saying, really you need to understand the how. Or before you agree the how, you really need to understand, well, what are we looking to achieve and why? And if you think about some of the research that both Leslie and Sarah showed, cost savings, improved accuracy, all of these things are great, right? We see them all of the time. But I think you really need to take a step back and really understand, okay, what are we looking to achieve? Why are we looking to achieve that? And then really get into the how. There's a lot, because of the hype at the moment, of discussion around how, which tool we'll use, how we'll implement it, what the process is going to be. And really, if you're thinking about a strategic approach, you do need to take that further step back and really look at why and also what, because for me, intelligent automation, hyper automation, whatever you want to call it, really is a tool in a toolkit. Again, going back to Sarah's diagram there, it's one of the many levers that you can pull. You need to know when it's the right lever to pull, and that therefore needs to form more of a strategic conversation. So if it's the only thing you're thinking about, it's probably not going to deliver the right type of benefits for you, at least in that long term. And if you're thinking about long-term transformation, this needs to be a tool in your toolkit, not the panacea. I've seen a couple of instances, predominantly driven by COVID, where the conversation has moved from tactical to strategic as a result of the big ticket wins that this type of automation capability has enabled an organization, very big organizations, to still function during a global pandemic. So that is obviously one of the things that would really help move the needle. So if you're kind of on that tactical journey at the moment and wondering, how do you become more strategic? Yes, it needs to be top down, not bottom up. Yeah, you need to agree the what and the why. The one thing that gets people attention is being able to do something in a different way that's cost effective, quick, but delivers big benefits to you as an organization. That gets the attention. And I'll use a financial services organization that during COVID, big rapid changes were happening. We had the government schemes, we had loans, we had all of these things. Suddenly you've got every man and his dog trying to phone, text, email the bank in order to take advantage of this new, literally just on the 5 o'clock news legislation that's come out around something changing, some financial windfall, some loans, some security, and traditional IT is not going to be able to quickly enable an end-to-end automation on some of these, because they literally were announced, and you've got hours and days to try and think of a solution. So making use of RPA, tactical type automations in this instance has almost proved that it should be part of the strategic discussion, because no other way of working would have been able to shift the dial that quickly. And so, yes, it may not be the sexiest of technology types. However, it has a role. There's a place for it. And again, right tool, right time in the toolkit. So big tickets win prizes, right? Big ticket items. And I've seen that certainly over the last 12 months, that dial shift between, yeah, it's something we're not really that happy about. Actually, it is without doubt a strategic imperative, not for everything, but we need to have it in that toolkit. And that comes from IT, operations, the whole shebang. So I think that's been a great push forward over the last 12 months as a result of the impacts of the global pandemic. And the other thing I really am thoroughly passionate about, and this is one of the real success stories I feel I had at Telefonica, was around everyone's always interested in looking at what you do. One of the key kind of I guess mental shifts I made was, why are we always concentrating on what we're doing now? Why aren't we also concentrating on what we want to do as an organization? And why don't we get in front of the problem? Why don't we shift the dial and think about automation on day minus 50 of a new promotion, a new product, a service, etc. Let's not think about, we've got now 50 people doing X. Okay, let's use automation. Let's think about the original problem. Okay, we think we're going to get this much volume. These are the types of activities that are going to happen. Okay, the traditional means is, okay, we're going to do it onshore, offshore. How many people, which department are they going to sit in? No. Let's think about where can automation technology help right on day minus 50. So we build it in to new products and processes right from the very start, because otherwise what happens is we're fixing all of this stuff over here, and guess what? New stuff's being added over here. So we're not actually fixing the problem. We're not seeing those returns on investment necessarily that Leslie and Sarah spoke about. What we're seeing is we're seeing benefit over here, but we're just throwing that benefit back to exactly the same problem that we're trying to fix. So don't forget that it's okay looking at what you do now, but think about what you're trying to do and make sure that you're using the same ways of working, the same thinking. You're thinking about technology at both ends of the spectrum. Again, something I'm really passionate about. Automation should never be a project. You should think about it as a capability. You should think about this as a way of working. It needs to become part of your DNA. And again, it goes back to the thinking about all the way at the start, dealing all the way at the end and everything in between. You almost need to think about this as just a way of working. You think about automation as you would do Excel or Outlook. You need to really think about this as a capability, as a mindset, as a culture. That's one of the ways that you turn this kind of tactical into strategic. It has to become ingrained in your way of thinking about process and output. And I think that's definitely something that's very undervalued at the moment. A lot of organizations where they are thinking about automation, they do think about it in a tactical sense. They think about tactical because they're thinking about it as a project. A project delivers, a project ends, knowledge seeps out of the project because the project manager goes elsewhere. The people who are on the project have other projects to deal with. And so you're left with more of a skeleton versus a core. So really important that we think about this as a capability that filters through the organization and not a project team which dissipates. Investment is key. Clearly there is, I can't really think of any strategic initiative that doesn't need some serious moolah, right? You need to invest in this. You invest in your, even if it's in your people, your change management program, the technologies themselves. sometimes you just need to take a bit of a punt here, not necessarily worry about the short-term gain. We're very focused continually on short-term gain, how we benefit, in the next 6 months, in the next 12 months. Think about, transformation is not a short ticket item, it's playing the long game, and it might be an incremental transformation. I think gone are the days, and I'm sure Sarah and Leslie would agree, where you have a 5-year transformation plan. Things just change. If nothing else, we've seen the role of COVID and what that has done to long-term planning, right? The rule books were ripped up pretty much overnight, and we completed 3 years worth of transformation in the first 3 months. But investment is still absolutely key, and I think thinking about long-term investment, and then even if you're not necessarily getting those short-term gains, even if you're having to play the long game, you're doing it for the right reasons, and in the longer term it will seriously benefit you. And then last but not least, and again, I've been very lucky in the projects that I've run, the capabilities that I've created within both the clients that I work with and also the organizations that I worked for. And as much as I'm an operations guy at heart, I cannot understate the role that IT needs to play, even in operational type automation projects. They just need to have a core capability there. They just need to provide a platform, some governance, some maintenance. It's a bit of a pain, to be honest, sometimes, but it's absolutely necessary, especially if we're thinking about this kind of tactical to strategic maneuver. And the reason why I think it is incredibly important, and Sarah touched upon this a little bit, and I know Simon's asked a kind of question on this as well. Think about RPA, think about intelligent automation, we think about artificial intelligence. Yeah, these technologies are kind of low code, no code, but they're also, a lot of them are incredibly complex. And when you start bolting these technologies together, suddenly you've created Frankenstein's monster. Now, Frankenstein's monster might be delivering some benefits, but there's going to be upkeep, there's going to be multiple technologies here, there's going to be increased maintenance, there's going to need to be increased monitoring, especially as your tactical automations are now strategically important to the organization. I can guarantee that that is not a core strength of the operations to monitor the performance of core systems. It is the core strength, or one of the core strengths of IT. Therefore, as we move from tactical to strategic, this is incredibly important that IT is on that journey with you. I will guarantee now you will not move to strategic automation if IT is not on that journey. Simple as, and they have that experience. And one of my hypotheses is that as we see the increased maneuverability towards kind of hyper automation in the enterprise, that there is potentially an opportunity in the future where IT takes over, and this then becomes core IT. And maybe with them we start to think about some of these other technologies in the kind of ecosystem that then land more in the hands of operations. So a little bit of, I think, over the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to start to see the taking over of some of these capabilities by IT. And so I think, having them on the journey is incredibly important. And with that, Kerry, I can hand back over to you.
Okay, that is excellent. Thank you very much, Wayne. In fact, thank you all very much. So we've got a few questions coming on in, but I'm going to be greedy and go first. So I love this analogy you've just given of complexing, how complex it is to bolt everything together and creating Frankenstein's monster. So that leads to the question of, what's the role of the enterprise here versus what's the role of the service provider, and what are you actually seeing happening? Because obviously the service provider has been castigated quite a lot for being too slow to bring automation to the table, because obviously it'd be cannibalizing traditional revenue streams. So yeah, I'd really be interested in getting all of your views on what you're seeing coming from service providers versus enterprise clients directly. But I'll go to you first, Wayne, because obviously it was your analogy that I'm picking up on.
I think the service provider has, or could have a really strong role in this. Whether it's the the end capabilities that they're providing, or whether it's the resource needed in order to build, operate, and maintain. So clearly, this can be, and not always is, but can be either driven through the service provider almost entirely. I think you're right in your view that sometimes the service providers have been seen to be maybe not be as responsive. At the end of the day, they've got a core business. They've had to pivot themselves in this space, and they've had to rethink their business models. Because bums on seats if that's their main revenue driver, then unfortunately, automation doesn't necessarily have a bottom. So, how is it then going to be funded? How are they going to continue to drive revenue and be a profitable business in some of their old means and ways of contracting? But for those that have got it right, and there are certainly a few, I think there is definitely a role for both. I think there are some great collaborations that I've seen, and I think again it comes down to partnerships. It doesn't matter whether it's people or technology. The service providers that for me provide a partnership driven model, dual gains, you gain, I gain, and work hand in glove will be the ones that succeed in this space. And there are a lot that aren't necessary, in my view, kind of working like that at the moment, and I think it's those that probably give others maybe a bit of bad press. You're on mute.
I always do that. Why? There's always somebody that does that. It's me today. Right. Is there a build on that from you, either Sarah or Leslie? What are you seeing in terms of response from service providers today? Sarah.
I'm happy to go. Yes, so I think there's a lot of pressure on service providers to do this kind of transformation, and many of them are responding. And honestly, I think they face a demographic kind of time bomb, because in terms of if they're delivering services that are customer facing, the customers are the sort of the age group that is coming into the market is so used to doing things digitally that they're just not going to be satisfied with the old ways of doing things. The same with employees coming into the workforce. So they are going to have to change, and many of them are responding, apart from the pressure on them from their clients that actually want transformation. So I'm seeing some really very clever work going on where they have done the easy things that they could automate. They're now using additional intelligence and data gathering, analytics, and so on, operational analytics, to do even more. So it's got to happen, and they've got to face it.
Okay, thank you. Right, so we've got a couple of questions coming on in, so we'll take those first before I hog the floor again. So first, well, let's take this question really looking at the variances in global adoption. So this is a question for you, Leslie. Have you seen any variances in strategic adoption by global territory, and does culture make a difference?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, are there any variances in strategic adoption or thinking by global territory? Just wondering if culture makes a difference.
It's not the only factor. As I said, organizations come heavily siloed, and the older they are, the more siloed they are. Geographies are a factor, so you get a tendency for the USA to be ahead of the game. The UK struggles to be following that. You get some countries in Europe more developed in their approaches to intelligent automation than others, Germany being one, Finland being another, and the Scandinavians tend to be more collaborative on this. So geography does matter, but I tend to think that it's just one factor amongst many that are more organizationally based that create the challenges or lubricate the progress of automation. And I think I outlined the 8 areas where there are real problems, culture being one of them.
Okay, thanks. Wayne, you've got a global role. Have you seen anything, you know, that carves out different territories' approaches?
Do you know what? There are strengths and weaknesses, pluses and minuses, I think, in all the regions. I think now most regions have got, at least larger enterprises have got or have made a start. I still think that there is there's a lot to do overall, especially as we start getting down into smaller enterprise, the SME market, and even below, regardless of area. I mean, I agree with Leslie. I mean, I would probably argue maybe a little bit on the US point. We are an American business ourselves. I would have said at least initially they felt like they were further behind, a little bit later to the party, but certainly the investment that we're seeing from our US clients is significantly larger than maybe what we're seeing in Europe at the moment. So maybe that investment is what is causing them to have kind of caught up and overtaken. And I certainly said that was one of the core aspects of moving from tactical to strategic, is putting the dollar where your mouth is and really starting to invest in this. Yeah, I mean, even global clients that are federated and rolling out globally, there are different clients have got different pools of where they're stronger in different countries versus not. But I think still the UK, I think, is performing very well. DAC certainly appears to be moving more into that strategic arena, that the DAC area. I haven't seen a great deal coming out of Asia, if I'm honest. I've got a few clients over in that particular region. So I don't know whether, bearing in mind Asia is traditionally quite high tech. So whether or not they've adopted automation as quickly as what we have elsewhere, certainly the opportunity there. But yeah, other than that, I think broadly aligning with Leslie.
Okay, thank you. Right, so we've got a question in from Simon Greenwood. Why is automation and AI different than previous ways of technology? It's always been important to ensure strategy and senior stakeholders to be in place. No organisation ever implemented ERP tactically, so why now? So Sarah, you're smiling, so I'm going to put that one to you.
Well, it's because people can, basically, because they can do it in a small way and get away with it. It's the question of shadow IT, being able, just like people have subscribed to software as a service without needing many approvals, it's because they can. And as Wayne was talking about the tactical nature, often it's a tactical need for RPA. It's as simple as that. With ERP, big solutions, you need to change staff, you need to manage big change across the organization, and it's much easier to go it alone when you're dealing with these kinds of solutions that you can do quickly and easily.
Okay, thank you for that. That leads on to another question that's come on in, I think, quite neatly, which is how should an organisation manage governance if they are enabling citizen developers? So obviously, Sarah, back to you, because you did mention the citizen developer. So how do they manage the governance?
Well, I think they've got to be create a safe environment for the kind of development that citizens would do, and then monitor that and do a lot of hand-holding. It's not a case of just enabling the capability and leaving it to the employees to do what they like. It's definitely got to be managed. So create a managed environment, make sure that there's training in place and hand-holding and support in place. And there is a kind of commercial imperative for that as well, because citizen developers who are developing, say, robots, they will be on citizen developer rates as opposed to more expensive developer, professional developer costs. So there is a commercial imperative, and we're seeing some companies really adopt this approach purely because of the cost savings that they achieve. But I've also had heated discussions with people in the financial sector saying there's no way banks are going to allow this to happen. But actually, the company I'm thinking of is a bank that is allowing citizen development to go on. But again, it's got to be managed and the risks mitigated.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, so is there, and I'm going to ask this question to you, Leslie, are there any poster childs or poster children out there that we can all refer to? So, we're not doing a very good job, I don't think, across the industry of sharing the best practice of organisations that are really getting it right.
Yeah, the most obvious one is the DBS, the bank in Singapore, because it's been highly published about, and it talks a good game, but also it actually delivers a good game, and its financial results are very good. In fact, I think it's such a good poster child that in my latest book, I've got it as an exemplar of moving to digital transformation. It shows that you've got to have the strategy, you've got to have a strategic imperative, you've got to have a long-term business view, and you've got to fit what you're doing in terms of digital transformation into that. And it also demonstrates that it takes a very, very long time, that it's a bumpy road, but that the value you get is exponential. And if you look at the financial results of that company over the last 10 years, I mean, it is quite spectacular, really. But the old man in me, the man who has been looking at this since 1980, when I was first a project manager in IT, looks at this and says, well, the problem is that organizations that become successful are good examples, but, have they outlived their success? Maybe what the model that they used is no longer applicable into the future. So you have to be very careful about that. There are so many management books that have been written about poster childs, where the poster child has gone under within 3 or 4 years. So, is it an outmoded business practice or outmoded business model? Is an important question to ask of poster childs.
Okay, thank you. Right, we're nearly at time, so I just want to have a quick run round of views of where do you think we'll be in terms of strategic automation in 3 to 5 years from now. So it's kind of going back to Leslie's theory. It's either go big or hunker down. Are we going to go big, or are we going to be in the same place in 3 to 5 years from now? So you're in my eye, Wayne, so I'm going to ask you first.
Oh, so it depends what day it is and which way the wind's blowing to what my view is on this. So I'll go with what I was kind of briefly talking about earlier on. So clearly there is a need to make use of technology to create better experiences for both employees and our customers to drive or to continue to drive both business resilience and business profitability. So that is not going to change. If anything, it's probably going to become more important, which means this use of technology is clearly going to become more of an imperative. I think the current wave of technologies are still likely to fall more into the hands of the traditional type developer versus those of the citizen. And so I think we'll start to see this splitting out of intelligent automation that still sits within traditional IT, but it's still no code, low code, and quicker to develop perhaps than traditional means. So you still get some of the speed efficiencies, but there will still be this other sense of technology, and maybe it's the Microsofts of this world, where it literally is kind of click and drag and very simple, where people are automating micro tasks on a continuous and regular basis to make themselves as individuals as efficient as possible. And this sense of marginal gains across thousands of your employees is where you will gain some benefit, plus the speeding up of IT using some of these tools, but in a more swift manner. Those two things combined, I think, is where we might well see the role of automation in the next kind of 3 to 5 years.
Okay, thanks for that, Wayne. Sarah, your view in 30 seconds, please. Sorry.
Well, I think automation is just going to be so part of everyday business that people won't even think about it, about having it. It's just a question of what do they have and, match it to their requirement. I do think that it is really important on the sort of assisted automation, things like personal assistants and so on. Vendors need to win trust and allow us to give them our data, basically. And that, I think, will either slow adoption down or will really accelerate it, depending on what happens in that space. So win trust and allow us to use your technology effectively.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. And the very last word to you, Leslie.
I think we've all agreed that it will accelerate, and we've agreed that the technology will become more and more powerful and eventually irresistible. But I think there are two things that are important here. One is that when we've analysed organisations' responses to automation and digital technologies, they seem to fall into four types. One is a leader, one is a follower, another is a laggard, and another is an also-ran. And what determines whether you're going to be one of these four, and I'm sure this is what's going to influence the way that organisations go ahead, is number one, what's the managerial mindset? Is it strategic? Does it see automation and digitization as transformational or not? Secondly, as to Wayne's point, what are the technical capabilities you've got? If you haven't got technical capability, it doesn't matter what the technology is, you just can't utilize it. And thirdly, what are the implementation capabilities of the organization? So that's one area that's going to decide how much the organizations pick up this increasing technological process. The other one is, what are the headwinds? We've seen in Australia, in New South Wales, which are a land I love, we've seen fire one year and severe flood the next. And the reason that Wayne and myself and even Sarah are provisional about the future is because we have no idea what the headwinds are. And so we could all come to a great cropper. We could discover, for example, that electricity is no longer available.
That's Texas, isn't it?
To digitization. We just cannot predict some of these things.
Okay, that's great. So thank you very much to Wayne, Sarah and Leslie. Please do stay with us. We are now going to move on to some user cases. And I think, one of those user cases really plays well to Sarah's point that we won't even know there's automation there. So we're going to be hearing from Avient about their journey through Clariant. And then we're going to move on to M+ Group, which is a really interesting challenger consultancy that's grown from 100 to 8,000 people in the space of 4 years, having taken very much an automate first approach to business. And then we're going to be listening to Ash from Blue Prism, who's going to be talking about their operating frameworks for automation success. So without further ado, I'd now like to invite both Miguel Morales and Constanze Neuspelling from Avient to talk us through the journey that Clariant and now Avient have been on for automation. So Constanze, are you with us? And I can see you, Miguel. Excellent.
I'm very much here. Hello to the whole team. I'll let Miguel drive the presentation.
Okay, over to you, Miguel. Thank you.
Yes, hello. I'm going to try to share my screen. Let me see if that works. Here we go. And you let me know if you can see the screen.
Perfect. Yes, we've got you. Thank you, Miguel.
And you got the presentation, not the presenter mode, right? Okay, great. Yeah. So, yes, Thanks for the invitation. I hope everybody can hear me clearly, and let's get right into it. So this is what I prepared for this slot, which is for us in Avient now. It's a short introduction to who we are in Avient. Then we go briefly on the strategic approach which we took by touching the why automation, the first process, then automation approach, and avoiding the complexity pitfall, which we figured. And last but not least, and that's where I want to get as quick as possible, is to show you some of the deployed and running bots. I picked 3 examples, and I also prepared a small overview of where we currently have automations in place. So Avient Corporation. Many don't know this name because Avient Corporation as such exists only since July last year, but it is a combination of 2 well-known companies in the chemical industry. On one hand side, it's PolyOne from the US, and on the other side, it's Clariant's Masterbatch business. The Clariant Masterbatch business was acquired by PolyOne, and when they merged and the deal was closed, they formed a new corporation, Avient. We have 9,100 employees. We have roughly $4 billion in sales, and we have 105 sites across 30 plus countries. These are the key industries in which we are active. It's from appliance via consumer, electronics, healthcare is a big portion. Obviously, packaging is of high interest, and it goes down to wire and cables. And all these key industries, they are actually aligned with some of the global trends. We do know healthcare is always a global trend. Now, it's pretty obvious that sustainability has increased in their exposure worldwide. There is nearly no company which has not some extent of sustainability exposed and marketed. Demographics and the buyer power. How do we do our business? We have 3 business units. Color, Additives, and Inks is one of them. CAI, that's where we are, Constanze and myself. We do have the engineered polymer formulations, and we do have the polymer distributions. These 3 business units are working pretty independently. There's little to no crossover, and so they can really follow individual strategies for their respective portfolio. Now, let's get into the topic. Why automation? This was a question, of course, which we asked ourselves once we were also invited to present here. I gave it the subtitle, When Robots Meet Humans. The strategic approach which we took in late 2015, beginning 2016, was actually starting like also Mr. Wilcox said, it is about profitability. It's about I want this ROI, and as we understood back then in the times, the chemical manufacturers agreed largely by 3/4 of the surveyed population that automation has a decisive impact on profitability. Now, as a consequence, since we already had created a global business services to also address profitability, but not only, especially also standardization, harmonizations, compliance, enforcement, and so on, this global business service department, a globally operating department which also hosts shared service centers, was actually predestined to be the carrying vehicle to look into this topic of automation. And for the global business service to really deliver on given strategic goals, the RPA was considered as being a very, very effective and most promising enabler for the global business services goals. Important to know is that back in the days, it was also looked very clearly into the who owns the RPA, and maybe this different to other companies, it was taken the decision that GBS, the Global Business Service Department, would own the RPA within a center of excellence and center of expertise, and not IT, like in other companies. And then at the end of the day, of course, it was getting very clear that studying white papers, business case studies, and listening to advisories, RPA was really much more than just a technology. That brings us to the area of process and automation. for us in the company, it became pretty obvious that automation makes only sense for the areas which truly work. A very complex process to be automated looked rather difficult to impossible, because we figured in some POCs that the only thing which automation does on a very, very complex process is to run it just simply faster against the wall. So we looked at first the process, check whether processes can be standardized, harmonized, and then only we looked at the automation. This meant mindset change at especially at the middle management and upper leadership management levels. Before investing in automation, it was important to invest in best practice processes, which included the involvement of many, many stakeholders, especially down to the shop floor. Then, of course, this cycle worked very well after getting these mindsets set up, getting these task force teams working together, exchanging their perspectives and understanding on process details and improvement potentials. The cycle kicked in, processes were analyzed, were standardized, and they were harmonized, and then the automation kicked in. And we always kept in mind what one of the famous persons in that space for process management always said: the RPA does not redesign anything, and that's something we had to promote in our corporation many, many times, at many occasions, in management committee meetings of business units and so on. It doesn't ask what the bot will do is the right thing to do. It just will do it. It will do it fast. It will do it continuously. It will do it accurately. But we have, of course, to find the process which truly works to apply that straightforward acceleration. And that led to looking into the different processes. And of course, the chemical industry is not the easiest industry. We do have some very complex processes there, not only in production, but also in our administration, unfortunately. And we had to very quickly understand that never try to bite off too much, or not to bite off what you cannot chew. Famous saying, probably applicable everywhere. So we approached it by not over-engineering bot solutions, rather going basic, going small first, having a pilot, and then run the bigger scale test. Always try to automate first the not too complicated, too sophisticated areas, also not to apply too complicated and too sophisticated solutions, because also there the try runs we did also showed that we could optimize a specific area in an end-to-end process and then figure out later on that 3 steps further down the road the workload had intensified or became more complex to work with. So that led obviously to eliminating the wastes first. This is all based obviously also on the Lean Six Sigma approach, which we run in the company. We have black belts and yellow belts, which do analyze by the means of Lean and Six Sigma, and that's where we came to very objective findings. And of course, what we also understood, as much as we wanted to have a top-down strategic approach, which was actually creating the playground to operate and to move forward with automation, we figured out very early in the game that we have to strongly involve the shop floor colleagues, and that we have to really dig out in interviews, in mission rooms, we called it. We had to figure out every detail of the process, and that was sometimes really a mining work, because for those guys working on the shop floor, certain tiny side steps were so obvious that they did not mention it in the first, not even in the second interview, and only when we were doing the value stream mappings, that's when we really put in the post-its for every little corner. That's where many post-its suddenly popped up with the one or the other tiny thing, which in the big picture was not that tiny anymore. The strong involvement of the shop floor colleagues was also very critical, and that's why we embraced the bottom-up approach very strongly, because by the just top-down approach, we figured that the colleagues which were key to actually understand the process to then automate, they were very insecure. They were very intimidated. They always had the fear, the bot comes along and my job is redundant, and then I'm going to kill myself. by supporting this initiative. And we had to change the mindset of those teams working together to show that it's really about eliminating waste, eliminating non-value adding steps, accelerating stuff which are time consumers, which don't require really the human intelligence, and that obviously also for many colleagues was a kind of boring activity. Now, getting to the bots which are active, we have 24, we call it digital workers, which support our workforce. On the left-hand side, you can see in which areas we actually deployed bots. The pipeline is pretty big. There are about another 24, 26 bots in the pipeline, but we have deployed 5 bots each in account receivables, account payables. We have 3 bots each in procurement, logistics, finance. We have 2 in the management systems and quality assurance area, and we have a bot each in product stewardship, data to insight, which is reporting, and human resources, HR. Now, I've grabbed 3 examples here. Let me just get my notes ready. Just a second. Here we go. So, am I back in share mode? Yes. So the first example is the auto posting of freight invoices and accounts payable. Here we piloted it in the sub-region DACH, Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. What was the problem we were looking at? Well, basically the accounts payable team responsible for that sub-region was entailing multiple activities such as scanning, verification of the invoice, invoice processing, etc. That team worldwide actually comprises out of 18 people, 18 FTE, spread on 2 shared service centers. And this team processed approximately 17,000 invoices per month. The process has 3 major steps. One is verification of the received invoices. The second is posting of the invoices in SAP. And the third one is the actual payment to the vendor. And while analyzing this process, it became clear that the posting of the invoices was one of the most complex areas of the 3 steps process, and it was consuming large amounts of the team's time. So that, but it was a very structured approach. So that was something which was a good candidate for the automation. The execution was at the end to analyze the data. We ran a Pareto. We picked freight invoices to be the most reasonable, most success promising area. And then we picked the top 20 vendors, which actually showed to have 40,000 invoices per year. And beside the robot, which was actually then designed to post those invoices, we also implemented a machine learning component into the OCR engine, optical character recognition engine, because obviously the pre-step was to read invoice images, and we had to have a very good degree of proper capturing. The result is shown here. It was a 10% productivity gain. The accuracy was 100%. The bot could really 100% of all invoices touched was posted correctly. And the solution at the end showed to be easy scalable. So this is a candidate to roll out to other sub-regions, to other regions and countries. The second example is about the logistics. Let me just grab the logistics part. 1 second. Here we go. On the logistics part, with the initial situation was that a team working for North America was required to do the activities of shipment movement tracking, communicating the right information to the cart dispatch and to the receiving party. But also for all shipments arriving into the US, there is an importer security filing required. The large volume and variety of these shipping modes coming in always made the team necessary to spend significant amount of effort in that activity, especially also because the ISF, the importer security filing, is a regulatory requirement. It was imperative that this process is at quality 100%. So we analyzed this with the COE team, went to the group which was responsible to run this. And at the end of the day, we could achieve a 33% productivity gain. One has to know that this is a team of 3 persons, so we identified the gain of approximately 0.8, 0.9 FTE. It was again proven 100% accuracy, and the whole exercise with the bot had a real-time turnaround. And the last example is the automated text analysis. This one, the initial situation was actually there was always a difference detected between the actual tax liability and the tax charged to us by the vendors. And the typical process was that the accounts payable team, which detected that, raised the discrepancy as observed while processing invoices to the tax expert team in the US. Those analyzed those observations and confirmed the decision of the discrepancy. Unfortunately, there was no standard process to ensure that all incoming invoices were actually analyzed. So the key here was to actually look into the process to find out what are the right key information pieces which can show that there is a tax liability to charge by vendor discrepancy, and to actually process them right from the beginning. We were looking in the US at more than 150,000 invoices annually, of which 40,000 invoices, that's approximately a value of $14 million, have a tax component. And while looking into these tax differences up to 4%, it came out that we could save $100,000 annual tax by correcting the unjustified tax charge by the vendors, by putting the invoice on hold, by contacting the vendor and requesting a corrected invoice issuing. And this summarized to avoid 200 hours, more than 200 hours of monthly people work by the bot, which could work 24/7, 365 days a year. And that's it from my side.
Thank you so much, Miguel. Okay, so very interesting case study. I do want to ask some questions on that, specifically the piece about it belonging to GBS rather than IT, because obviously that's a different conversation from what we were having earlier. But I'm going to hold my questions until we've listened to our other speakers. So without further ado, I'd love to hand over to both Luc Cavelier from M+ Group and Izetta, I'm so sorry, my pronunciation of your surname is going to be awful, Izetta, but Izetta Samardzic from Bulb. So over to you guys. Please do share your story with us.
Good morning, everyone. I hope my audio will be good enough. Otherwise, if it breaks, I have my phone connected also. So just want to present you. My name is Luc Cavelier. I'm from, as Kelly said, I'm working for M+ Group, and delighted to present you what we're doing. So M+ is one of the leading service provider in Southeast Europe. We currently operate from 13 different cities in 5 different countries, 4 being in the Balkans, and the other country being Turkey. We provide services in 29 different languages, and we deliver today more or less 58 different countries around the world. You can go to the next slide. I just want to hand over, as quickly as possible to the use case for Izetta to present later on, which I think will make a lot of interest. We're providing, as I said, our services to a variety of clients, going from telecom companies, telecommunication companies, to financial services institutions, to energy sectors, to e-commerce, and to electronics. So you can really see us operating from all different angles around the world. And the main differentiator, I would say, you can go to the next slide, Izetta, thanks. The main differentiator here is that, as most of the BPO service provider, we're providing services, omni-channel services, including voice, including emails, including social medias, including back office process, specific services for KYC, and including also debt collections, for example. One of the things which is important in M+ Group is we are really listening to our clients and our clients' requirements. And robotic process automation is also something that we've added into our process. And why did we do that? Simply because, Izetta, you can go to the next one. Simply because in the past history, I've been in the RPA business, but in 2017, if you look at what Deloitte was saying, everybody was, the analysts and the Fat Four, and everybody was like, yes, let's go on RPA. RPA Journeys is the one that's going to make it. It is a true story. It went well, but there's also something that was highlighted is that intelligent automation to bring, let's say, something more valuable for agents to handle would make a better service. And so going from there, you can go to the next slide. Yes, thanks. So they also identify clearly that at that point of time, intelligent automation and robotic process automation would definitely reduce cost, bring, let's say, a better service. But what is for me really the most important thing is to improve the customer experience and added value to, not only the agents that are working on our centers, but also the people and the clients that are calling in or that we're dialing up. And that is one of the reasons why, within the group, within M+ Group, we've been adding several pillars. One of them being the BPO services, the second one being the consulting side, and the last one being the technological side. And this is where I want now to introduce Bulb Technology that just joined us within the group and the Sempresso product. And I will leave Izetta presenting with a little movie in between. And that's for you, Izetta. The floor is yours.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Luc. So as Luc already said, I'm here to share with you today one of our customer success story, which is actually from telecom industry. But before we get to the concrete numbers, I would like to share with you one short video as to how exactly we deliver intelligent process automation for our customers. So enjoy it for the next 2 minutes, and then we'll get to the point.
Yeah, we don't getting the video. We don't getting the sounds, Izetta. That's.
Yeah. That's okay. I'll give it a try, maybe to enhance the sound. Perhaps it will work now.
Still no.
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 Okay, then we'll try something else. Yes. We'll go to Vimeo page and start from there. I hope this will work.
Otherwise, I can play it and leave the sound on my phone, if you want to. We don't hear it, Izetta.
No, I don't think it's working.
Okay, let's go to the next slides. Don't worry.
Okay, I'm sorry. So overall, in short, Bulb Technology actually delivers a software solution to deliver intelligent process automation and customer engagement to our clients, all empowered with analytics and artificial intelligence in behind. So this concrete use case we wanted to show you today is from a telecom industry. And this is the client we've been working with for the past 4 years, since 2017. And just like many others, they also embarked this RPA train as well, but very fast. They actually acknowledge the fact that RPA won't be the solution to their issues in total. So they switch part of their projects to intelligent process automation. And this is where we jumped in. So they actually had a project that had 3 different goals at that time. One was to automate and digitalize entirely end-to-end troubleshooting process for fixed services. The other goal was to introduce fully new digital channel and self-care application. And the last one was to establish a proactive care process. At that time, they didn't have any proactive care workflows on site. So the reasoning behind all of this is actually the challenges they had for years before, both on the end customer side as well as their internal resources. So when we talk about their customers, they were really struggling to actually get to the call center and report their issue, because the only channel they can use was actually customer service call. So every time they called, they were actually dependable on the skills of the agent they received. And at that time, one of the main challenges that Business Within had was the fact that they had a very high fluctuation of agents. And accordingly, their operational costs were very high due to the even long average handling time, number of wrongfully dispatched tickets, and as I mentioned, long onboarding for the agents. Even though they expected that their customer experience would be higher, at that time it wasn't at the level they anticipated, which was due to this lack of expertise in the contact center and the high volumes of interaction they actually received. One additional challenge they had, and this was one that followed us throughout the entire project, was the fact that agents had to use more than 15 different applications in every single call to solve customers' issue. So what we at Bulb offered them was implementation of our entire platform, namely Sempresso platform for automation. And we solved actually all of their challenges and tackled all of their goals. So for the customers, we actually implemented a standalone self-care application that was accessible through mobile and web interfaces. This application was actually driven by a guided workflows in behind that was adapted for, let's say, customers' knowledge and customers' understanding of the process entirely. While for the internal stakeholders, and these were customer care agents, technicians, network operations, and so on, we implemented 3 different solutions. So to start with, we implemented Flexible Work Portal, and this was a tool used for internal task orchestration throughout the company. Second tool we implemented was actually agent dashboard that was also driven with these guided workflows in behind and offered the agent the 360 visibility. And the last but not least, we implemented a mobile application that was used on the field to actually confirm that the repair was done correctly and the service is up and running. I would like to stress out here at this point that we didn't actually change anything in the ICT landscape of our client. We actually added them one additional layer of automation on top of everything they had, just to leverage all information they already had within the company and provide their customers on one side or their internal resources on the other. Additional benefit was that thanks to the fact that we exchanged their 15 applications being used in the call center, their agent onboarding lasted 3 weeks less than before. So we dropped it from 1 month of training to 1 week of training. Well, I'm not going to be ambitious and say this was a challengeless implementation, because it wasn't. As I mentioned, this was very complex when it comes to integration, and by the end of the project, we had to integrate with over than 28 different systems in total. There was also a challenge when it comes to self-care that was already in place, being used by other departments, but we had to implement our own solution and migrate the customers from existing one to a new one. Also, execution was quite challenging because our timeline for implementation was very short. So we had 3 months in total to actually for the first deploy, which meant that by those 3 months, we had to integrate all the systems and develop all the workflows. So this was quite challenging for us. And I would say that most challenging thing of all was the fact that they had very limited internal resources to assign to the project. So mainly we had to compensate throughout the entire project with our own resources and capabilities to make sure that the project will be done on time. And of course, I believe every project has these ones. Change management implementation was done in parallel throughout the project. And of course, the scope creep grew significantly throughout the project. As I said at the beginning, this was one end-to-end implementation, and we affected probably every department from customer service all the way to technical fields, network operations, and so on. So here we just stressed out some key KPIs that we impacted positively, either on the increase part, so for the first level solution rates, for example, agent satisfaction, customer experience and retention, and so on. But we also decreased operational costs, agent training time, unjustified tickets, and truck rolls dispatch, which is significantly. But our client actually chose only 5 KPIs to track throughout the project, and this is these 5. As you can see, 3 KPIs were actually focused on only call inflow, whether it is to call center in total or significantly to, let's say, technical branch of the customer service. 2 additional KPIs that were tracked were also regarding ticket dispatch, either to 2nd and the 3rd level, and the wholesale ticket dispatch. These 2 KPIs actually were very significant for both us and the clients, since they were financially very large and very expensive, but it also enabled our client to shift these resources to some other project that were long-term standing on hold because they didn't have internal resources to assign to them. Here on below, I also stressed out 1 KPI that's linked to our proactive care use case. Namely, we track Wi-Fi consumption at home and Wi-Fi operation. So in case your Wi-Fi at home is not working properly, we fix it in behind fully automatically and without customer ever noticing he has challenges with Wi-Fi at all. And this one actually resulted in 27% of less Wi-Fi related tickets sent to the customer service, and that's financially very concrete. Now, I just wanted to show you here how exactly it is that we do it. Let's imagine us like some sort of an octopus somewhere in behind of your landscape, and we connect to practically every system that is relevant for analysis and detection. So whether it's OSS, BSS, various services, network elements, or even home network and devices used at customer premise, to gather as much information as we can, analyze them, and then generate actionable insights as to that can help you to solve and improve your processes throughout the company. So we are capable of understanding and supporting various protocols that you use, so there's no problem with that. Previously, I heard so many times talking about low code, no code, and everything. And I would say that this is the beauty of our tool, because we are actually quite flexible, and we are a completely low code application or software solution that there's no business logic implemented in behind. And that's what our clients actually like, because to develop and maintain processes in Simpresso, you don't need any high-level IT developer. You simply need to learn the basics of the tool and you can use it. I myself actually can use it probably quite well, even though my technical expertise is none probably, but it's feasible. And one additional thing is, since we are omni-channel platform, we actually allow you to create and design one process once, and once you deploy it, it's applicable absolutely everywhere and anywhere, regardless of the channel you are using within your company. So this is all from me. I don't know if Luke has something to add on.
Well, I just want to say to Kerry that might be the solution for your network provider to solve your Wi-Fi connection issues. And that's it.
As you can see, I have no broadband issues at home, and my internet connection is fully operational all the time. So call us, we'll fix you up in no time.
I was thinking exactly that. If only somebody had predicted that I was going to be going down to start off this webinar, that would have been incredibly helpful. So that's excellent. Thank you both, Luke and Izetta. We will come back to you shortly with some questions and then into a discussion. But now I want to invite Ashutosh Agarwal from Blue Prism. So it's going to be taking it from a slightly different perspective here, obviously. So Blue Prism, I think it would be right to say, is actually almost the inventor of RPA. So the whole term robotic process automation was brought to the stage through Blue Prism, working with HFS Research probably about 8 years ago. So really keen to hear from you, Ashutosh, as to how you're helping your customers deliver successful automation and perhaps slightly more strategic automation. So over to you.
Thanks, Kerry. Can you see my slide okay?
Perfect. Yes, thank you.
Okay. So always tricky to, be the last speaker in such sessions, especially after the esteemed speakers we've had, but I'll do my best. So what I thought I will share today are some insights and lessons learned on how organizations can plan and run the intelligent automation initiatives that are truly successful at enterprise scale. So, a lot was talked today, but there are some, it isn't a state of nirvana, very difficult to reach. So, but before that, when I reflect back in my current role, I get to work with heads of RPA and rest of the leadership team across various organizations in their aspirations to deliver more with RPA across Asia Pacific and Europe. And one of the perks in my role is I get a vantage point to see the journeys of various organizations across industry verticals and different stages of maturity, right? And as they embark, they scale and sometimes even stumble. There are different maturity models one can come up with, but largely there are 3 stages that we can look at, where organizations obviously start small, keep the risk low, and then they start scaling to build over the initial success. I think Professor Wilcox also shared something similar, right, with starting with efficiency and 3 or 4 stage model. And here, if you see from the left, the initialize is that first stage when you start off with a proof of concept, as most companies do, and then you move on towards the right with industrialize and then institutionalized, which are these 3 stages. As we've seen so many customers now traverse, in the RPA maturity model. And across organization, business benefits and capability as they mature in the RPA journey, they deliver superior business benefits. They're looking to do more with less. And on the far right, is that state where in institutionalized, most organizations have the digital workforce as a key lever to their to the organizational strategy, right? It's in this state that they've established, to provide transformational business benefits, and this is the organization, and there's an organization design which is helping to scale. So, like Professor talked about DBS as opposed to example of something, I'm sure there's somewhere quite close to that or beyond that. And while we don't see most companies yet operating at that level, I think I personally have seen many who are almost there or getting there. So there it isn't something which is as difficult to aspire for. So to get started, I mean, what are some of these elements that make an intelligent automation program successful? What are some of the things that we've been seeing and I've personally seen as well? But before that, what is success for an intelligent automation initiative? Success here should not be just about a program that survives, a year and a half, covering its cost of operations and delivering some business benefits in the mid to long term. Success here should be about a truly transformative, initiative, an enterprise which is delivering, and scaling up in the mid to long term in terms of not just the scale of operations, but also business benefits and the nature of business benefits, right? And that is where, in that far right stage of maturity, we look at an automation first mindset that we've seen some of the large customers, not necessarily the oldest ones, who found themselves in. And this is where the automation is then bringing value to improve competitiveness, reduce risk, improve brand value, move up the needle on customer experience and similar areas, than just reducing FTEs and some operating costs. Unfortunately, many are not able to leverage the transformative power, right? And they end up in what I would call the transactional success. And what is that, right? That is where they have a well-oiled COE, it's cost neutral, it demonstrates value, but mostly through labor savings in terms of FTEs, which is full-time equivalents, right? So sometimes they may translate this into hours back to business or even dollars and pounds saved. But all these are derived from the underlying FTE reduction numbers, right? So you say, oh, we have 25 people in this use case, and so 25 into X dollars or hours back to business. But the underlying unit is hours, number of hours per FTE and things like those. And so why is this? Why do we see this happening? And I think the view is that while enterprises do have a good start, they're not able to scale, but they end up with instead of really a transformative success, they end up in what's transactional success. And most often I see this path to transactional success is, it's so obvious because it's a natural graduation from the initial, phase of initialize and being in a POC, right? So that's where, unless they come out of the initialize stage and have an active change in their approach, they continue to drift and meander and continue to do what they were doing. Because in the proof of concept, the focus is on quick wins, right? You're looking at the low-hanging fruits, the use cases that are most often, called task automations. And it is okay to, if those are the best ones, it's okay to get them initially because you want to also see the technology, whether it works, how does it work with our systems and in cost and all those in the proof of concept. But the RPA COE should then change gears once that has been established, right? And look to actively engage with business leaders in enterprise, right? And start looking at where they can bring value beyond those kind of use cases. So the focus should then be to look at identifying automations, automation candidates that really align to the organizational strategy. And unfortunately, many of these, they're aware, quite seasoned professionals who are running this. So they change gears, but that is only to go after larger and bigger task automations and not, level 2 or level 3 processes as per the process taxonomy. So they think they're scaling, teams growing, and they're doing more use cases. At the heart of it, the nature of these use cases hasn't really changed, right, from what they did in the initialized stage. But they're able to report back value to business. It's all based on FTEs. So there's a false sense of success when it's really, at best, transactional success. So if you see this plot, there is an inflection point where an intelligent automation initiative should move to an elevated framework, elevated way of, looking at and planning and realizing business benefits. And it is, this is how you can really set a transformative agenda and then, deliver benefits which are several orders of magnitude superior than those in a transactional context. So this, of course, can be achieved by consciously changing gears, and that's something that kind of gets into what I would want to cover in terms of more of some of the insights. But that is the point where many organizations today, I think, find themselves in a strategic dissonance to say, hey, we started with this, we established this, why aren't we seeing it, and like so many of the other speakers said, right? There's always this thing about having some expectations and then looking at to say, why is my RPA program not delivering, to what we thought it should? So, from here, having some clarity on the starting point and more importantly, the maturity stages, how can organizations prepare and plan for that success? So I'll break it into two parts. First is around some of the critical success factors to have a good start to the inflection point and beyond. And in so many areas, right, it's extremely important to have a good start so that you can build on your initial success. And then the second part, planning for success, to look at some of the other finer areas which are more of execution nuances, which really then help embark from that inflection point to a transformative success. So you don't want to get caught in the transactional success and have been the feeling that you're being successful. So let's look at the first part in terms of some of the critical success factors when starting on an intelligent automation journey. And luckily, we don't have to look too far. From its experience over the years, Blue Prism has put together the robotic operating model, which provides exactly this. So the ROM, as it is called, it's a distill of wisdom, if I would say, collected over the years, working with customers to help them succeed, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, which is as important. So, and over the years, we realized the importance of ROM in so many ways that we even have a certification now, right? So you can become a ROM architect. I did mine a couple of years back, and extremely insightful as you go through that theory and then, come out and, see it in practice, and you can kind of join the dots. So what exactly is a ROM? What constitutes a ROM? So here are the 7 foundations that constitute the robotic operating model, right? In the interest of time, I won't go into a lot of details on each of these, but I'll just cover the high level. Some of them are quite obvious, I would imagine. So vision, is really about having the right vision for the RP initiative, the Intelligent Automation Initiative, and aligning it to the larger vision of the organization. The second one, organization, is really about having the right operating model, the right construct. And this is where you get into the org structures, federated, citizen development, central, hybrid, and then those kind of things. So it's extremely important to have a view on that, to have a plan on that, and then marry it with, with the maturity stages and see how that kind of pans out. And then governance and pipeline, which is my favorite. This is all about having the right governance with the rest of your organization, with business, with IT, with security, and building the right pipeline of candidate processes. Because once you have your automation engine and delivery team cranking off, you need to have a good pipeline, and processes should be such, you shouldn't be automating, as they say, just because you can automate, right? So there has to be some due diligence, and so what are those to build the right pipeline? And then you go on to delivery methodology and service model, which are more around the operating teams, where they deliver the builds, right? So they create the builds. Are you reusing? Are you looking at, are you setting up a cottage industry of different kind of bits and pieces of automation, or are you looking at a more, programmatic approach? Service model is all about, it's easy to create, relatively easy to create automations, but how do you run it ongoing? What happens when a target application changes and there are breakages? So how do you preempt all those and put a process in place, right? And then people, extremely important. All of us know. So what are different roles? How do you change how do you evolve with the right roles? And going on to technology, and all this is technology, right? But if you see, it is important, but I think that there's a lot to the success. And technology is somewhere where you look at, the Blue Prism platform, the underlying controls, governance, and all these. So of these, the first three is where you require a lot of active engagement from the COE and the leadership team working with the rest of the organization. And then the last four are more internal to the COE. And something incredibly remarkable about the ROM is that companies who started the RPA practice without being aware of it later shared their feedback on success factors, and often those would cover a good set of ROM foundations. So if you don't know of the ROM, you will eventually get there in your own way, but it provides an excellent framework to start with, right? So to my last slide, so finally, what are those critical success factors that are important beyond the inflection point? Obviously, the robotic operating model is absolutely relevant and relevant even beyond the inflection point, because you're starting with the right foundation. But like I said, there are some execution nuances, certain things that I've observed and talking to my colleagues, and this is basically 4 areas which I think are really important for organizations to be aware that after you come out of your initialize POC mode, these are areas to really focus on, right? And first is obviously the head of RPA and the exec sponsor should look at recalibrating the steer and focus to ensure that the path that is being charted is now getting ready for transformative success. You got to change gears, but not by doing more of the same as you were in the POC, but looking at focusing on more of transformative success. And the key here is to ensure that the focus shifts from task automation to truly processes that are aligned to the larger organizational goals, be it like I said, improving customer experience or reducing risk and things like those. And a key factor here that I've also taken, observed is that you got to also take cognizance of where the COE is sitting. The COE, in many cases, these days sits within IT, and that brings us different set of opportunities and challenges versus sitting within business. And so again, different flavors between those two ends of the spectrum. Secondly, this shift to look for transformative kind of, as you look at your use cases, that pipeline of candidate processes should be really looked at, right? And if you miss this, you run the risk of slipping back to that inflection point and meandering into transaction success. So the pipeline should reflect the intent and the recalibrated steer. And it's also crucial to have a right benefits framework. So every organization would have some framework to look at, as you get a pipeline of processes, which ones to automate, and then also in what prioritization. So that framework should again reflect the whole intent to get into a transformative mode. Otherwise, if you don't do it intentionally, you kind of again run the risk of slipping back. And last, but not anyway the least is the focus on driving culture adoption, right? So as some of the other folks spoke today, it's all about organizational change management. There is technology in the mix, but it's no different than allaying people's fears and also helping them understand and driving and building a momentum with the rest of the large organization. So that's where you get the required visibility, you get the buy-in, and you have people knowing and talking and then preparing for it, right? And so it has to be obviously top down, and you move at it laterally. So that's kind of a quick run of some of the thoughts and, as I said, view from the trenches. So Gary, I'll go back to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ash. That's great. So a couple of questions. And the first question that springs to mind is this whole sort of divide between whether it belongs with the business or whether it actually belongs with IT. And I'd really like to invite Constanza and Miguel in for this one, because obviously you drove your program from the GBS. The GBS actually had the ownership of it. So I'd be really keen to understand how that came about and whether there had been a battle with the IT department at any point.
Yeah. Thanks for the question. I mean, in fact, this is a discussion which is probably ongoing in many companies, and it was also ongoing in our company. And what we were figuring out at early stages, engaging into RPA as such, or automation as such, was what was the going in position of each department. The one department, maybe a bit traditional, was looking at the platforms, was looking at the technical possibilities. And the other department was a bit more into what is the process like? What are the people doing or not doing? Where has the process non-value adding steps or idle time? And by comparing these two positions, these two going in positions back at the times, leadership figured out that it might be more beneficial to promote the agenda by giving the responsibility of driving the RPA into the department which is closer to the process, which is closer to the users running those processes, and which have these users even inside their own department. So that's why it ended up in GBS, and IT, of course, is not blended out or is not out of scope. IT is a complementary department. It supports the platform. It supports also certain troubleshooting of the technology, but the agenda is owned and driven by Global Business Services, being closer to what we want to automate.
Okay, thank you. And do you think that gives you, more access to the culture and being able to drive the cultural change because you actually own the processes? So the culture piece is really interesting for me. And one of the comments that you made was, a fear within your team of not necessarily losing the boring aspects of the job, but actually killing off some of their roles. So where are we kind of at with cultural acceptance of the use of automation now? So I'd be interested to get the views from all of you, because this is a debate that I've had with Professor Leslie Wilcox a couple of years ago about the language sets that we use, the images of robots, and and all the headlines of robots taking our jobs. Where are we actually at with that now, and is that still impacting the cultural acceptance? So Izetta, I'm going to go to you first with that one.
Okay, thank you. So to be honest, I would say that people are not losing the jobs. I mean, that was the story when RPA started and intelligent process automation. But in fact, what I see from the projects that we've done, what happened was that people whose, let's say, steps were shortened and they were free for some time, they actually got the new tasks and they took new, more responsible roles to work on. So I don't think I've ever heard anyone firing 10 people just because we automated some certain process, but we actually got some resources for other projects that were much complicated. But before that, they were never in the first spot because they had no internal resources to cover it. So this is my opinion would be that it's just a shift of people to more useful cases where you need a contextual understanding, where you need someone to do more complicated tasks than simply drive a process from one step and another and to do these tiring, repetitive tasks, I would say.
It's also depending really on the sector, Kerry. So
yeah.
In the case of being a BPO service provider and a technology service provider, we can use contact center BPO agents in a more, let's say, more valuable task than just doing the encoding and the validation of different things by automating the process for them. And it's, well, I mean, I hope everybody understood that, but what we brought in was Bulb is the ability to do a proactive sanity checks and troubleshooting of everything before it reaches the agent. So it's intelligent automation plus RPA at a certain point of time. If you look at this, it's just, but in our case, it's really to predict what is happening, and then when you pass on the call to a human, that the agent on the other side have all the analytics done, cleared, and you know, it saves him a lot of time. You know, everybody went through a call to a contact center service provider for help desk, and then press 1, press 2, can you give me your code again, can you do this again, can you reboot your modem, can you do this and this and this. Here it does it all in a predictive way, in a proactive way, before it reaches the agents.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. So, Miguel, obviously you had that challenge internally of people being concerned about losing their jobs. You've proven it's successful. What's the future of automation across the whole of Avient now, if you can share?
Well, the plan is scaling. We want to really scale up. We want to promote some of the bots which are working very well in smaller geographical scopes to larger scopes. We have to also understand that the automation maturity is actually in Avient on the Clariant, legacy Clariant master batch side, not on the legacy PolyOne side, who acquired the Clariant master batch side, because Clariant was and is more advanced in that game. And by now moving master batches from that corporation into legacy PolyOne and becoming Avient, we want to now start leveraging the good experiences and apply them to the whole business unit CAI, the color additives and inks. And then we want to eventually roll it out to the other 2 business units by showing success cases and really convincing them in a rush. So scaling is really one of the priorities.
Okay, thank you. So Ash, you talked about ROM certification. How many people have actually gone through your ROM certification so far, or is it still too early days?
No, it's, I'm sorry, I don't have a number. It's definitely in thousands. It's been around for a while, right? And I think you know, it's not just now our customers, partners, and really anybody, right, who wants to kind of have a great appreciation of automation and look at all the right building blocks from start. So yeah, it's definitely in thousands.
Okay, excellent. So we were having a conversation yesterday about Service Provider 3.0 and how the service providers were really needing to embrace, you know, the many disruptors that are coming their way, automation being one of them, but also and talent and different things like that. So how much work are you actually doing with service providers vis-a-vis how much work is actually being done at the enterprise customer end? And then I'll come on to you, Luke, because obviously you are a service provider.
Was that for me, Kerry?
Yeah, that's for you, Ash. Sorry.
Okay. So, you know, none of Blue Prism, we've largely been, and we pride ourselves in being a partner-led, company, right? Which means a large part of our revenue and then execution has been coming through the partnerships that we have built over the years and continue to invest. So by that, I would say, you know, a large part of our revenue is coming. But there are a couple of things that we're seeing. We also seeing some customers, and I know some of them in my patch, who are now wanting to do more stuff in-house, right? Who are now wanting to take more control. In some cases, completely running their shop, the automation COE, and in some cases they probably will take some staff augmented from external sources, but you know, really. So I think we've kind of, while we continue to focus and invest with the partners, you know, some of these customers, when they reach out or they want to have direct help, that's where customer success and the teams, you know, we have a partner success function as well. But customer success is where we help enable the customer along with the partner, right, to be successful. And so we look at the ROM and the whole different areas.
Okay, thank you. So moving to the service provider side, obviously, you know, where are you seeing the decision-making line? Is that balance changing for you, Luke?
Well, it is a balance changing to a certain extent, but you know, we are a service provider, but we are servicing also, or serving some of our, let's say, friends within our industry, simply because we are a nearshoring operation, so we are providing services to others. But it's it does the decision making on robotics and on automation is really something which. I would say 15 years ago, when I was doing another company, people were, as Izetta mentioned, people were afraid about robotic process automation. People were afraid about we're going to lose our jobs. And BPO and service providers were like always like, well, that's going to, turn off and some of my revenue because I'm going to lose my seats. At the end of the day, if they look at it correctly, it does bring a lot more business and a lot more services, and it will also enable the clients to stay on board and to have less churn of clients if you automate it and if you do it well together with them. So my point of view is, honestly, it has changed the mentality, and it's still, I'm an old chap, but in our industry there's older guys than me, and everybody's still, when you're older, you're always afraid of getting the new technology on, but it's starting now bringing some real use case, some reality, fact and figures. People are starting to understand that RPA, intelligent automation, AI is bringing a lot more than taking off the business. Our economy is changing, no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely right. So we are at time, but I'm going to give each one of you a last chance to have your final say. But if we were to summarise the conversations we've had since we kick-started this at 9:30 with Professor Leslie Wilcox, Sarah Burnett and Wayne Butterfield, it seems that automation delivers, but we're actually doing ourselves still this disservice of not making it strategic enough. So we've got this opportunity to drive this change. Us together working collaboratively as an industry. I don't think we can all do it individually. What's your one piece of advice as to, or your one desire, your one wish of what we need to do differently to actually drive the strategic automation agenda faster? So Ash, you're big on my screen, so I'm going to go to you first.
Okay, so I think quite a few, right? Quite a few pearls of wisdom. But if I had to pick one, I think it's starting to get to be less of technology and more important to be of the software aspects, cultural adoption, governance. All right. So I think there's an earlier question on cultural adoption, and by all means, things have changed. But it also is a function of the size of the organization and things like those. So I think focus, while technology will happen and things like those, this is about organization-wide change. So focus on the software aspects and building a momentum. Spending more time with business leaders and folks than looking at the technology.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So next to you, Luke.
Well, I mean, listening to everybody since this morning, and when one of the question was on to Wayne was where we will be in 3 to 5 years from now. I think 10 years ago when we were talking about the electrical car, everybody was laughing. Today it's becoming a reality. RPA has been on since 2000, and intelligent automation and AI is something which has existed since World War II. To a certain extent, if you look at this. So where are we going to be? Simply, in a better way of handling clients and customer experience, from my point of view, by providing home office, people working from home. This COVID-19 had impacted us massively. But look at this. We're doing a call today with how many people on it? Through video and no breaks, more or less, in terms of I'm joking, Kerry, you know me, but it's just where are we going to be, in something which will automate a lot of things, will be proactively detecting things before, and honestly, if I'm happy and the client is happy on the other side, the world is getting better.
Okay, thank you. Luke, Isetta.
Well, I think it's hard to add anything more than what Luke said. I mean, what we've noticed in years is that companies have noticed that the customer experience is important. And this is the fact. Customers don't want anymore to call the customer service. They want this state-of-the-art tools they can use from their home. They don't want to wait for anything. They want to have it fast and rapid. So this is actually a driver that everyone has to think about. It's not something that's all. This customer experience will just grow in desires, and we have to be able to respond to it. And I think the RPA and the intelligent process automation actually is the answer to it. I mean, just closing the door and saying, okay, this is something that will cost us our resources. I think it's the wrong way to go, because there is so much more we can do better and more efficient if we simply just use our resources more effectively and to the point, to be honest.
Okay, thank you. And over to you, Miguel and Constanza. if you're still with us, Miguel. I can see you are, but you might be on mute.
Yes. No, I'm here. Sorry. Well, I'm more the user side, right? That's why I might look at it as slightly different than the solution providers. And from the user side, what I can see is that as much as we want to drive the agendas top down with strategies and so on, and of course it's also on our agenda to make senior leadership aligned and clear on it, and also give us the go to invest more, to spend more resources, more money into this. It comes very much, for really successful approaches, it comes very much from bottom up. You have to get the user base of which we want to automate work really on board. And this is not done by a strategy paper or by a position paper or by a board decision. It's really done by engaging the people which do the work today. And you need to really get them, because these are the information providers for any automation. The automation doesn't happen by itself. You cannot just put the computer there or the bot and then it just studies it by itself and then runs. At least at the moment, I don't know an affordable technology which can do that. Maybe NASA or so, they have the money and these resources. So it means many people need to be involved, and people which know what we want to automate. And that's why I think the bottom up is key for this area to really excel.
Okay, that's interesting. So maybe a bottom-up approach if you're a big established organization, but if you're not, there's the automated first approach from all the challenges. So you know, pretty certain today that any new business setting up is going to have automated, you know, the nth degree out of every process before they actually kick start. So those organizations that are going to try and stay in business and compete against the new challenges are going to have to take both a bottom-up but also a top-down approach to automation. And I certainly believe we, as an industry, have a duty of care to promote the benefits and the opportunities through automation, and stop the headlines. It was only last week, it was a headline in Computer Weekly that 11% of all F&A jobs in Australia are going to disappear within the next 3 years. You know, so we're still actually combating the negativity of the story and not doing enough collectively, I believe, to promote the positivity of the story and the opportunities. So that leads me to say, you know, stick with us, come with us on the journey of driving, you know, the all-important area of change in and making automation more strategic. So thank you very much to everybody that's joined us for speaking today. Thank you very much for everyone that's joined us for the conversation, and keep the conversation going. So stay in touch. All right, thank you all very much indeed, really appreciate it. And apologies for my comms right at the very beginning. I'm moving over to your telecoms. Yes, that's where I'm going. Cheers, guys.
Cheers, bye.
Bye-bye.